Hey there folks, it's your boy BankBank, coming at you with another episode of Puzzle Theory. This time the title is Non-Versus. I couldn't really think of a better title that would be all-encapsulating for what I want to talk about today. All-encompassing? Simultaneous and side-by-side also include versus games. Co-op doesn't really work because the players aren't helping each other in most of these modes. So the first game we're going to look at is Pukanpa for the PlayStation 1 and Saturn. This game is really neat. So you know how I'm so interested in buttons, right? And basically, I love 2-button games, or maybe 3 buttons are allowed for Star Sweep. Well, this game requires 4 buttons. Clockwise, counterclockwise, and then you see those little bubbles with 2 balls inside? You can actually rotate those both ways as well, inside. How cool! So this game, Pukanpa, features one of the mode types I want to talk about today, where 2 players play independently at the same time. They're not fighting, they're not competing, they're just both playing at their own pace, selecting their own difficulty type. Really neat and not too common. Next up is an arcade game we've seen before on the Puzzle Theory series, TechyPaki. This game does not have a 2-player competitive mode. The only 2-player mode in this game is non-versus independent. And next, we have Emeraldia by Namco, an arcade title from '93, which is probably my #1 game of this year. I built a stick just for this game. It's an incredible play, with 2 different single-player modes, endless and levels-based, and both are playable independently. Each player chooses which mode they want to play in and their difficulty and plays completely on their own. Now, if a second player joins in and chooses Versus, however, then both players will end up battling in the Versus mode. Here's another game that I think is slept on by the community, Kuru Twinkle for PS1. I've shown it here before. It's kind of like Panel Dupont, but with a 2x2 cursor that flips horizontally and vertically. And it's got independent endless. Really cool stuff. Now we're looking at Columns 2 in the arcade. I think Columns 1 also has this mode, and Columns 3 I don't think it has it. So this is the same as what we've seen in the previous games, independent endless. I think Columns 2 is quite a neat game. It's got this bonus round that is kind of like Korth or Magical Drop, not shown here. And now let's look at 3 Tetris style games. First up is Block Seed in the arcade. It's got independent endless. It's a decent Tetris game, not much to say about this one. Next up is Jellicoe's Tetris Plus 1 for the arcade. Now the interesting thing here is that the sequel to this game, Tetris Plus 2, does not have independent single-player modes. So in this game, each player can play either the endless or puzzle mode completely by themselves, but if the other player joins in and chooses Versus, they go into battle. And again, in the sequel, this functionality was removed. Not sure why. This game is cool, but it has some really annoying, repetitive music. And now, the big daddy of Tetris, Tetris the Grandmaster. In this case, Tetris the Grandmaster 2+. So from what I understand, every entry in this series has independent endless. Okay, now we're looking at Dr. Mario 64. Now this is a different situation than the games we've looked at previously. This game has a cooperative mode where you play alongside a friend against the CPU. Every other multiplayer mode is competitive, whether it's Flash, Score Attack, or Versus. So it's not independent endless like the previous games we've looked at, but it still falls under the type non-versus. Up next is Konami's Hexion, an arcade game running on an ancient CPU. Now this game is cooperative, it's not independent endless. And something which really sets it apart is that it takes place simultaneously in the same well, on the same board, so the players can collide with each other. The falling pieces can block each other off. This is really interesting and innovative, especially for such an old game. Just make sure you select the right option when presented, otherwise you're going to hear a really annoying voice clip every time you drop a piece. And finally, here's Amsah, a game I've been working on off and on for over a year. This game is coming out on Steam May 10. Please pick it up. It's got 2-player non-versus, and it's not independent endless, but it is co-op. But unlike Hexion, the gameplay is not simultaneous. That's because the falling pieces are quite large relative to the board. And basically, if the players are dropping at the same time, it might be almost impossible for either player to ever cross over onto the other side. So the way it's set up, it's basically turn-based. I'm really interested to see how people will react to this co-op mode. Now, I'm sure I've omitted some entries, like probably some of the Puyo Puyo games have at least co-op and maybe independent endless. Please let me know down in the comments which games also have these modes, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video. And thank you very much for watching!